out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Rin Tin Tim. Oh. I forgot to feed my cat.
Meow.
Tim, did I or did you forget to feed the cat this morning?
I forgot to feed the cat. Why is that sounded weird? I forgot to feed the cat.
Tim forgot to feed the cat.
Here's what I forgot to do. Get fed by a movie.
I forgot to get fed by a movie.
What I mean is, I didn't feel satisfied by this week's movie.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm a little sad about it, actually.
And what are we going to talk? We're going to talk about it on episode 31 of Dismembering Horror. Welcome all. Welcome to you listening. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it may be, to, as I said, episode 31 of Dismembering Horror, the podcast show where myself, Ryan McDuffie, and...
Oh, that's me over here, Tim Aslin.
Exactly. Tim Aslin. Timbo Tim. Rin Tin Tim. Tim the Toolman Taylor.
Oh, God.
We talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything we found interesting or noteworthy about horror films that we want to see or you want us to see. AKA, we dismember them. I really enjoyed this week's film. This film's week.
Well,
this
that's
week's
good.
Film.
That means we'll have something to talk about.
I know. Well, let's watch. No. Yeah. Let's do that. You want to watch the trailer?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, the trailer for what?
Oh, yeah. Let's for this week's film entitled "Cat People."
Across the centuries comes this exciting story of a modern girl cursed by an ancient legend. The legend of the cat people. Women whose kiss means death, whose love turns them into vicious, snarling beasts of prey.
Twice I've been followed by something that was not human, something that attempted to take my life. I believe that was the cat form of Irena.
Why should she wish to harm you?
Because I'm in love with her husband. It's shut, Val. Just a minute ago, it was open.
It's locked. Leave us, Irena.
Interesting, they called it in the trailer. You couldn't see it at home, but it said "The Cat People."
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
There's so many of them.
I love that. It's nice, swift 1 minute trailer for a nice, swift, 73-minute film.
Thank God.
Well, okay, we got our summary to do.
You sure do.
All right, it is Cat People. It's about a immigrant Serbian woman living by Central Park in New York City, who, we learn, what she claims is she's amongst a small group of people who have been cursed somehow, where they turn, where at the sign of, or at the...
Not so easy, is it?
No, I never said it was. At the, at any sort of, like, feelings of lust or desire in that sense, the purely sexual sense,
or jealousy,
yeah, or
there's
just
sort of it's in a little, it's wrapped up in that stuff,
right? Wrapped up in that stuff, she will transform into a cougar, I believe, is what the black cat in the Black Cat that's featured in is called.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think if I remember right, technically cougars, panthers, jaguars, and maybe that's it, are all basically the same.
So maybe panther or jaguar, yeah.
But like
It's regional, like
yeah.
buffalo and bison. I learned is the difference between those. So that's okay, but that's not what the whole film is about. So that's who it stars. But really, it's about her getting together. They have a meet cute. She has a meet cute at the zoo with a sort of all-American Joe guy. Mm-hmm. Very optimistic outlook on things. Named
Oliver.
And Irina's the Serbian woman, and Oliver, thank you, Tim, is the optimistic American. And they quickly get in a relationship.
Very quickly.
A marriage. On the second date, he's buying her a cat. And conflict ensues from their her inability to consummate and a impending love triangle.
Oh, yeah.
And a nosy doctor. Or psychiatrist.
Nosy. He's a real fucking
psychiatrist, psychologist.
Yeah, he's a psychiatrist.
Well, yeah, what did they say about him is like, he's a real hand kisser, if you know what I mean.
Boy, is he. Well, he gets his.
Yeah.
So,
did anything to add to that? That's what I took away from the film. This wasn't like any sort of definitive summary. This is just so you folks know how we viewed this film.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. That pretty much covers all of it. I mean, I think her setup is that she has this sort of a kind of, she's drawn to the Central Park Zoo and the cat cages, so to speak, in particular. And so, she's got this kind of underlying like obsessive thing going on. She's in her head.
Yeah. Yeah.
All like from all angles, she's in her head. Like regardless of what the situation is, she's sort of internalizing everything.
Yeah, she's always got cats on the mind because of this curse, and kind of has a. It's interesting actually because this is maybe applicable, but like cats and animals are afraid of her, yet she is drawn to them.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
How do we rate it? Well, I can segue. Like, I think this, like how we just said, oh, like I just started, my mind just started going off there. It's like, oh yeah, this movie was just so dense for me, and the kind of this, like the best kind of films were kind of the Black Cat, where it's swift like this, but because it sort of doesn't get muddled in the B stories or things like that, it's like almost like The Fly with kind of a character story, minimal characters, locations, like it, and just sort of a very clear story theme, whatever you call it.
Have I seen The Black Cat?
That's the one that we watched with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff.
That's called The Black Cat, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So another cat movie.
My brain.
The Black Cat People. What? No, The Black Cat and Cat People.
Oh my God.
We're that kind of film it's kind of streamlined, but like where every aspect of the film is doing something for this overall exploration or thematic exploration. It just gives you so much to chew on. And as well as just overall, it had some like what don't seem dated, but seem familiar things now are, you could tell this was the originator. So for me, kind of like what I said about Halloween, like this is, when you see it here, it still has this sort of pure, powerful essence to me, like in its raw form of what these seem like, these simple scenes. Like I get chills, but we're thinking about the people getting chills when it first came out, when I sort of put myself in that context, and I can see the sort of essence of it all coming through. So a little preview of what's to come about what I worked from it, but to like, I have to kind of give an in summary review to kind of say, I give this a very hearty rent, but kind of like Oni Baba, like it could easily be another one that grows on me to buy it. Like Oni Baba, I think I gave her rent it. But now I'm like, oh no, I would totally own that. And
yeah, I think I said you should buy it, especially Onibaba. I mean, especially if you are a filmmaker.
This one, yeah, I don't know. I can argue it's a buy it too, but for me, because I'm strict with that right now, I give it a rent it.
Well, I don't give it a rent it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I give it a stream because there's cool stuff in it, but it didn't grab me. We'll talk about this, obviously. I'm glad you liked it because I'm trying to figure out what to like about it. Mm-hmm. And I know that there are things sort of almost topically, but I just went away kind of being like, yeah, I don't...
Like the movie itself didn't... Yeah.
Yeah, I never really felt like I got pulled into something that I was vibing with. I was like, yo, cool. Mm-hmm. It just never landed. So I'm a stream.
Yeah. I think
I'm a stream.
What brought me into it.
I'm not a river.
I'm a rent. I'm not a stream. Yeah, wait, I don't know. I'll remember when we're talking about what worked for me. I was just sort of going to counter like whatever didn't work for you to say like, oh, how I was able to sort of key into it, which I'll get into.
Let's we'll explore that because I'm not saying I don't have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I have a lot that didn't necessarily work. I just was sort of not like thrilled by it.
Yeah.
Kind of like I said, I didn't go away feeling satisfied. Mm-hmm. So, that ends with a stream to me.
All right. Well,
just waiting in that stream. Just fishing in that
Okay, stream. All right, let's do it. What worked?
What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked for you?
I think that we can pretty well get some obvious things out of the way.
How it was shot. Yeah. This was like, comparing to, I guess, another black and white horror film we've watched, Onibaba, and we have The Black Cat to compare it to also.
Yeah.
This, for me, was the kind of great visuals. It wasn't so much in like the camera movement and everything told the story well, but that's more so was the standout of the other films for me. Uh-huh. This one, it was just the sheer lighting. Yeah. Just looked gorgeous. Like there were some shots that were completely unassuming of just them standing there in this environment. I'm like, I want to take a bath in this. Yeah,
the set design is really pleasing. I mean, it's so cool to me to think, and we talked about this with The Black Cat. Now I'm remembering what movie that was. Where you kind of wonder how much of the set design was kind of based off of the noir stylistic lighting stuff that obviously the DP and the director, like the artistic design that those two are bringing to the set design and saying, hey, when you build this set, I need this, and this to look this way because I'm going to light it this way. And that obviously still exists, but for some reason, noir feels more intricate to me in a way. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's removed.
I think it could have to do with the budget they're working on. When you work on a lower budget, it's sort of that attention to detail you give things when you have less options.
Yeah. But it's just very exciting to me to be like, look at all the shit that they kind of arranged just to make this. I think what it is partially is that in the style of the time, a lot of the time in the scene, not a whole lot's going on. It's a dialogue scene and it's kind of like, they're just two people talking about whatever. Sometimes it's just bullshit exposition, whatever. Sometimes it's like a little sort of belabored like dialogue where you're like, people don't really talk like this, but we got to get through it to get the information out. Mm-hmm. And then in spite of the quote unquote boringness of the scene, the visual of the scene is, even if it's a static shot, like you're saying, you're like, whoa, this is a painting. There's a bunch of shit for me to take in.
Even just as an unassuming location as the office that he worked in.
That office was really cool.
Like that, okay, I'm trying to remember the names for that episode that Oliver and Alice worked in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, other general things, how it was shot.
I mean, I can point to, I think, one of the cooler constructions of light and shadow and whatever is, so she has that room divider. What do you call those? Don't those have a name? That there's sort of 3 panels,
like where you see the person changing behind it. See
yeah,
their silhouette.
it's like, yeah, that kind of thing. So she has one of those, and it's got a painting of a panther or cougar or whatever on it, and this is sort of when shit's starting to really unravel between her and Oliver. And the shot of her in the foreground, that 3-paneled divider thing with the panther in the background, and I believe the statuette that she has with King John slaying a cat is kind of in the middle of these two, of her and the thing in the background. But on the shadow that is cast on the divider is of the cage with the canary in it. Oh. And it's so the bars of the cage itself is directly around the panther's head that is painted on this divider. And the canary is dancing around, like flitting around the mouth of the panther in the cage.
That's so...
That shot, I was like, whoa, is that intentional? And then I'm thinking, fucking of course it is. But holy shit, that's genius.
Yeah.
The next thing that happens is she goes to play with the canary.
Yeah.
And it dies of fear.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, holy shit, dude. That is genius shit.
Okay, so well, I'll just say, for generalities, maybe just go over a few of the select scenes I loved. That was one of them. Like, remember we were watching it? Yeah, when it's a nice moment where we feel like, despite her sort of love for animals and yet reticence to interact with them because she knows they're afraid of her, she's like, you know what? I'm married now. Things are looking up, and maybe I'm going to just try to show some affection to this bird and pick it up and hold it. And it was just so tragic. Like, we thought, oh, was she going to do something to it? No, but it died out of fear. She
didn't even touch it.
Yeah. It just didn't want to be grabbed by her so badly that it died. Like, holy crap. That was, I keep using this word, it's so loaded. It was great. I love that. loved that moment. And then I loved, like, just the little... Just like what I sort of mentioned earlier, just sort of some of these what seemed like tenant scenes of, was that tenant? I don't know. Tenants of horror, tenants. Sure. Anyways, but where it just really did that what makes horror great in essence job of allowing the audience to draw. I mean, all storytelling, allowing the audience to draw the connections themselves. But in ways I'm sure hadn't been done, whereas like the footsteps, the muddy footprints changing from jaguar paw prints to like high heels. And then at the end, towards the end, when she's in her full human form, but like scratches the couch and it fully tears as if she had sharp
really
claws.
Cool too, yeah.
Oh my God, that was so good. Yeah, I love that. So those were some moments I loved. And then the standout scene I thought was that pool stalking scene.
It's definitely the best scene. Yeah. Like, no question.
It was so good because she's just on, Irina is on full on stalk mode on Alice, the new, her husband's old friend who's going to stealing him away. She stalks him down into her apartment swimming pool. And what was so neat about it was like how it escalated from sound to shadow blob, Yeah. And just that, and each one of those elements was just working so strong. Just sort of, you felt the fear that she'd feel of this. And I got her when she jumped in the swimming pool. Like, if it's an animal, I just would feel safe being like, having water separating me in it. If it's like what it sounds like, you hear a clear jaguar yell or, crying out. And then like the little moment that did for me at the end of the sequence, it was something where I felt like I should see this in movies a lot, but I don't, especially horror, where we're at the end where she's like, oh, I'm fine. This is all it was. And then as soon as they start to leave, the people checking up on her, she goes, oh, yeah, but wait, I'm getting out now. If you just wait up a minute so you don't leave me with her,
Yeah.
Yeah, because she transforms from her cat form. She's standing there with her and is like...
Very casually.
Yeah.
I love that.
But that was so good of just that clear lie of being like, oh, I'm fine. Oh, but actually, if you want to wait for me, I'm not terrified, but I am,
Very human moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course you would feel that way.
Well, that's one of my favorite, I guess, transition, like thematic things this is exploring here I feel like you couldn't do it in this day and age as much because that sort of idea of being your truthful self when you're telling a lie, so to speak, or living a lie, so to speak, is so much more... Maybe it's just sort of different in how if it's whether more or less prominent. But back then in films, like in moments like this, oh, really? I'm fine. Like where they say when someone says they're fine, they aren't, in real life and in films and storytelling. Right. Like, especially back then, you just see it so much more. But that whole idea of like living a lie or being your true self. Remember the last line of the film?
Oh, yeah. What is it? It's, she never lied to us or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like after all this, that we went through, she never lied to us.
It's a little bit of like, I guess we should have seen this coming.
Yeah, well, what was cool about that, it was sort of that the double meaning of, well, I guess, from as far as we've seen, she really was a werecat this whole time.
But she definitely was.
Yeah. so it's like, oh, she wasn't lying. So that's kind of what he was saying. But the way he said it sounds more like he was saying, well, one thing about her character that she has on us, at least, is that she was never lying versus you and me who have been working with each other for 15 years and it's been unrequited romance this whole time.
Yeah. So I have a I have a theory, and I think that it may just be me creating a thematic sort of thing based on what I find interesting.
Yeah, that's what's great about movies.
So in that sense, I love this movie because it did that for me. Mm-hmm. But I think I want to get into it as a thing of note.
Okay.
But the fact that even is how you walk away from this is a thing that is working. Yeah. No question. Because I spent a lot of the movie kind of going, I think this is a many-layered metaphor. I'm sure it is. Mm-hmm. But while I was watching it, I kept thinking, I'm not clear what the metaphor is. Like, does it have to do with something specific to that time? Or, well, obviously, you would think it would. But what is it? And I spent a fair amount of time kind of mulling that over. And I have an idea of what I think it could have been. But in reading some of the reviews and like what other people have said, nobody else is saying what I think. So I don't know. So we'll get to it.
There's definitely other things that made me love it that I pulled from it. I didn't necessarily pick up on anywhere else. It's rich text we're pulling from, Tim. It's textual.
That's right.
Textual healing. But like one of those, was this idea of your true self or what that means in your day to day. And like that, I guess that topic like had two major prongs in the film that was going on, like for me, where it was kind of this love-hate dichotomy being explored of as far as in relation to being one's true self or not. Because you had, the two different love story. It's a love triangle, so it's it's the gentleman's Oliver's love story with Alice and Irina, the cat person. So he says this in the film that his kind of love for Irina is one that comes from sort of an unknowing, like that sort of that allure. But he says it's sort of it's also something that's comfort he has, because what does he say? It's like she makes him feel, I don't know. There's something about her. Maybe it's like an innocence. I don't know. He sees something about her that he's drawn to. But basically, it's like the kind of love that feels like it's especially maybe what you did back then is where you would just take an extreme attraction, and that's like, oh, I'm in love with you.
Right.
You know?
And there's a certain proper procedure that I have to do if I feel this way. Like, you don't just go date for a while and get to know each other.
Right.
You fucking say, I'm in love with you. I know it's crazy, but I am. And we're going to get married. And then you get married. And it's like, now that we're married, we should get to know each other. It's like, whoa, what the fuck?
It's like between maybe more what's modern now and an arranged marriage. It was like an in-between, which is kind of our grandparents' generation.
I mean, seriously, like, I know that my grandparents, this may just be coincidental, but like both sets of my grandparents actually had, so they kind of were in the same towns and they met and they kind of got to know each other. And there was a little bit of in my dad's parents' case, I think they went to college together, and then he went off to the war. But they had met and they kind of were vibing for, I guess, the first year of college before he got purposefully delayed, because he had a professor who was like, I know if you enlist right now, you will be in that first wave and you will fucking die. Wow. And so that guy took the kids who were going to enlist at, this is up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I think it was the technological college up there, and said, wait a month to enlist and you'll be delayed just enough so you will not be in the first wave. Point being, that's such a tangent. But anyway, so he survived the war and came back, and because they had started this romance before the war, like, they continued it, and then they got married. So there was like time and sort of, they got to know each other, and they had a really long, great relationship.
I wonder if they could have gone to see 1942's Cat People on a date together.
It's a good question.
Is that incredible?
They probably
just the kind of time travel when you're talking about your grandparents like that, and then
because I think he didn't leave. God, I'd have to look it up, but it's very possible. So on my mom's side, though, there were sort of varying opinions between the two families of whether or not they should be together or date, and that delayed them jumping into it. So they actually had time to get to know each other too, and ultimately were like, no. Like, my grandfather was like, no, I want to be with this person. We have a relationship that is going well and we like each other. So there was also that sort of, there's time to get to know each other.
That, discernment and suggestion that your family gave them of like, oh, don't you want to figure out? That's exactly the sort of two prongs of the kinds of love here,
right?
On Cat People.
So of the time, I think there's very much this kind of like, some people had a very like, you got to do it this way, and some people were like, are we still there? Like, maybe we should.
Well, so it was that sort of not short term, but like just jump right into it relationship with Irina that Oliver has, but then it's with his longtime coworker Alice, his friend, who I love their relationship. It's great, but that represents, she gives this nice little monologue, I thought, about like, hey, like, we've known each other, and I've always loved you, kind of thing. And she's very, like, it's great. I love her. She's so just like kind of cool about it. Like, she's
no nonsense.
Yeah, after she says her piece, she's like, oh, she's fine.
Now, a really interesting directing note of that moment. I thought to myself, because there is of the time kind of a melodramatic vibe. I think that's just the style of the time. I expected in that moment when she like kind of reveals her true feelings, that they're in a two-shot looking at each other. She's sitting, he's standing. So he's sort of power dynamic in that. He's above her. I really expected her, and I think she's actually on a stool, to swivel away from him and kind of like, turned down stylistically to represent like her shame in having said this or whatever, or her embarrassment or whatever that might be. That's sort of a cliched version of this. And she just does it. She just sits there and like keeps staring right in his face. And I was like, oh, cool. Like they made this active choice about who this character is and the way she behaves. And she's not, you know, a delicate flower that needs to be protected or whatever. She's just like, no, here's how it is.
Yeah, I got it. I loved it.
I don't care if you know.
Awesome. I'm glad that stuck with you too. So this was all talking about, you know, revealing your true self or not. And I said, you know, how it's represented in the film by those two kinds of loves, his relationship with those two women on the love spectrum. But then you have this whole other thematic side of the darkness in us all, where it's like Dr. Judd even talks about like
fucking Dr. Judd.
Yeah,
that
there's
motherfucker.
There's a deep psychic need for like violence and death.
Unleashing evil on the world or something like that. He says at one point, like, we all have a need for that. It's like, what?
Yeah. No, I totally...
Calm down,
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Judd.
I agree with him. I don't think he's being... I think that does exist in all of us.
He's just talking about his penis.
Oh. You just don't like him. Right.
I just don't like him. He's a creep.
But I think point well made, and an interesting point to make for the film that he made. Because that's like the kind of when you see Joe Blow, Oliver Reed, who's just kind of just such this optimist. He's kind of completely, you know, doesn't acknowledge that this is a side. And
a bit naive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? He's got kind of a
good naivete. Yeah,
wide-eyed thing going.
But yeah, that was I don't know. Yeah, that was all interesting. There's even more like just little ways I saw it popping up, though. The idea of like how truth versus not truth is popping up. Like, I loved her line when she goes, oh, I like the dark. It's friendly. Yeah. And that sort of made me think when it got to the doctor's lines, like how she finds, you know, since she is the one literally transforming into this cat monster, that she's more in touch with that, you know, side of death and and violence, you know. We see that in her. So there's a kind of truth in death. You know, death can be comforting when it sort of represents a certainty. Like if life is so uncertain, the one certainty we have is death. So it was kind of a sort of nice, not like tiptoeing around, but just sort of like, I don't know, it brought up those ideas for me. It was interesting.
Well, and I think there's a deeper metaphor in there of her being a foreigner from a fairly war-ravaged part of the world historically. Yeah. And to have been around that kind of stuff as your ancestral lore, which obviously this movie is talking about literally, they're just saying that it's this other thing, this cat people thing. But like the deeper metaphor of that is like, we as a people have been in like really intense, tragic sort of fighting and war and like the terrors of that for as long as probably she knows. It's why she probably left Serbia. Yeah. Her family, you know, these small villages, even the stories of King John coming in and like fixing the evil in the area is sort of this metaphor for like war and the ravages of that and who decides what is good versus what is evil. Right,
like I represent God, so we're the promised ones coming to save you by killing you all.
Yeah, and when that's the lore of your ancestors, like that has a deep impact on how you view the world and yourself. Right.
Well, that is her truth, that outlook, as well as this curse, which I thought, as to stay on the truth thing still, it was really interesting too. Not the idea of the personal truth, but your sort of versions of reality, where like the stoic Americanism, you know, represented here, you feel that naivete come through. Totally. When it's like their truth, their reality is this is nonsense. You're crazy. You can be committed. I want you to know that. But her truth, remember they kind of threaten her with that?
Yeah.
But her truth
the doctor
is
being like, you can just send her away.
right.
But
not
take care of
just
it.
not just her experiential truth, but how she was raised as an obvious given is no, there's cat people. Why is that?
Right.
That's true. It's not, I'm not crazy.
Yeah. And kind of fuck you for gaslighting the shit out of her.
Right. So that's what drew me in about this film that I was getting at. Why it worked for me, what drew me in is kind of that when it's a story of skeptic in the typical sense of the word, how we've defined it previously, people who are what I want to say is the viewpoint of what is currently is, or what I see is what the truth is. That's all that there is. You know what I'm saying? So people like that, when they get their comeuppance, you know, where it became a story of her just making a point to these people that like, no, actually cat people are real. The world as you know it isn't the whole world.
Yeah. Well, and I think otherwise we wouldn't have a story, but there's an interesting dilemma in this, because she could just be somebody who believes that truth and accepts the fact that she shouldn't fucking be around anybody.
Yeah.
But she doesn't. She engages with the culture of the new place that she's in, and she goes along for the ride. She gets married. She does the things, and then she's like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that because that's not who I am. So there's this whole other conversation, I think, that to me is...
like her question, yeah.
Yeah, like, why, if you know this, why tempt fate? But that's what makes a good story, right?
Because
we do that
she wants
all the time.
The why is what she says at the beginning. I don't have any friends. You're my first friend I've made. You know? Like that's tragic, but because I do think she's had that ongoing question in her life of like, I don't think I can live in this world, so I'm just not going to. But then with this glimmer of a friendship, which turns to, you know, kind of a romance relationship, marriage, whatever.
Yeah, and I think she feels, and this is, I think, a very common theme in U.S. American sort of modern history, the theme of the person who feels other than.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's this sense of like, oh, in the States, there are people who are representative of the culture of the U.S., and then there are the people who came there, and someone is drawing a line between those two things, and it makes no sense.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because everybody came here.
Tim, I want to jump into the other a lot here.
Oh, good.
The otherness. But I was still kind of talking about, I wanted to get real quick, the idea of like what she was doing and her perspective of the story the whole time, what we were saying, as far as like how the movie became her kind of making a point almost.
Yeah.
Which that drew me in. I loved that about it, was how it's like she's as a sort of, okay, no, I'll just have to prove it to you, I guess, F you. It's kind of like how, represent for me how like horror can be great for stories of just showing how like, not just people, but like how cultures as a whole, like they have sort of, what's the word, like pushed down, denied traits, just as like people can do. And so, yeah, you do have a foreigner coming in basically being like, okay, you guys are missing this whole other side of the coin thing, and I'm going to have to prove it to you. So it's like it was really interesting because I thought, why I keep saying that it was her making a point, because she chose not to kill the couple. Like it wasn't something about revenge at the end. The ending, how it came together, was solely about, I'm just going to kill this like skeezy doctor to make a point, who is the kind of...
Well, he kissed her, dude.
Right. And he right, exactly.
He broke her rules.
And he also kind of represents the Americans' pragmatism, I think. Is
also the American, like, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want thing.
So she's just sort of unleashing that whole other side of the coin, which is why I said what horror movies they do. They sort of take this extreme other side in the form of some sort of horror thing that then attacks the sort of original status quo that's totally lacking in these traits.
I think this movie dances a really fine line, and I think at times I was like, I don't know if I'm cool with like where this might be going, of depicting her, this other, and specifically a woman, and having everybody sort of say like be dismissive of her, or like say that they know best for her, all that stuff. And then, which I'm on board with. I'm like, yeah, she should be annoyed by all of this, and she has a good, solid point of view. But where it started to slip dangerously for me was the second the jealousy storyline comes into play, and then she's going after the other woman. I was like, I'm not sure I'm okay. Like, I love that's the result that we're getting at, but they solve it by using the doctor to sort of restate the problem. Mm-hmm. The problem, like you're saying, is not Alice. The problem is bigger and is represented in the doctor, of how he sort of views the whole thing, and how he's dismissing,
like the approach of. Well, like the approach the husband has, too, is like, oh, there's something wrong with you? We'll just fix you.
That's
which
right.
is that American pragmatism again, like, especially from this time.
So, once there was a slipperiness at one point where I was like, no, this is, I don't like it. But they're good. Like, I think they knew that, and they've took a right turn into the third act, and we're like, no, here's what's gonna happen. Well, so it could have gone wrong, I guess, is what I'm saying for me, and it didn't. It was, I think they went the right way.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to talk stuff in the ending still too, but no, you kept touching on, again, with you bringing up, that she was, well, let's do the otherness. Let's go back to film school, Tim.
Okay.
That's where you just write essays about the other.
Is it?
That's all you do in film school. But this was really cool because Irina represented kind of the the other on, as I saw it, 3 main levels or ways. She's foreign, she's female, and she's young. And all 3 of those, what was really interesting for me and how this drove home everything for the movie, foreign, female, and young are all sort of like tied to like the idea of being more intuition based, and a lot of the times to supernatural things. Like, so when he says he's drawn to her, I sort of saw on that level, which was kind of like, it's why he was drawn to her, and is also why they could never really connect, was because of that 3-pronged otherness. Because you have like, as far as being more intuitive to super, like we think the female, the feminine is more naturally intuitive, kind of feels and then when you're young too, like, and he refers to her as like, oh, you're a kid kind of thing, or like
there's an innocence to it.
You're closer, you're more open to everything, you're more receptive.
You haven't been just stamped down by the world.
And then Ford, like we hear, I don't know, this could get me in trouble, total stereotype, but I feel like other parts in the world, they're like, you bring up something supernatural or ghost, and they're like, will get freaked out, or more like, oh yeah, like this is a cultural thing that's more kind of, we have a lot more words for these things, while like we just think Casper, it's ridiculous. Like, people are more open to those ideas in other parts of the world. I think there's I guess a holdover of the quote unquote old world way of looking at things, where it's like, you're not dumb because you are from a small village in the old world, but you have lore, right? And which us Americans don't have.
Yeah, we don't. Like, we kind of don't. It's kind of lame. And that the lore, however you take it, is still valid. You know what I mean? It's like it's a representation of who you are. Yeah. Over so many generations. Like, the fact that lore still even exists, like, has to be respected to some degree. Now, whether or not you want to take it literally and say, yeah, there's demons,
Yeah.
Whatever.
But I was
Yes,
saying
there are.
more at the difference of like when someone is like that much more afraid of them because of that cultural upbringing.
Sure.
It's like that's their truth. That's their upbringing. Like who are we to say whether what's right or wrong in that?
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting. I loved like how kind of what I said with the sleek running time, how it all everything had a purpose in it. Like, it was, I kind of wanted to laugh at first or not be into it, how like, oh, there's a cat in like every scene at every location and she has pictures of cats in her wall. But it's like, the movie always addresses that too. Like he says, oh, take those pictures of the cats off your wall, like be normal,
That's a big one. That theme, that idea of sort of who decides the difference between normal and abnormal.
But like you wouldn't be able to do that if it didn't risk being on As the Nose and she didn't have pictures of cats on her walls. You couldn't have that.
By the way, that reminds me of another little thing like what you were describing, like the claw thing and these little moments. But the cartoon cat Dream.
Oh yeah. That
came out of nowhere to me, but I fucking love it. It's just very cool.
And it was the repeated line that he kept saying it was the doctor's line about the deep psychic need for violence or death or whatever. And things, cool. This is other examples of how things just came together for me, like how you have the setup with the key letting out the big cat, that she visits at the zoo. And it all worked out perfectly with her motivations of like, okay, she found a way and it all worked out perfectly where it's like, it could feel like it's just too convenient, but it just all felt right and came together for me of like her plan of her reveal of her being a werecat is only going to be known to the new couple, because she killed the other person who knew, and because any evidence pointing back to her was now covered by the released tiger. Like that's where the blame goes, is the actual one that she released from prison, and she died in, I call it prison. He was in cat prison, in jail, in the zoo. Yeah, that is what it is. I felt so bad for that animal. Just like when you go to the Griffith Park Zoo here, the old one. Yeah, and it's just like they're just walking in circles. I'm like, I got so mad.
It's like a 12x6 little like pad of dirt. And
you have the zookeeper being like, "Oh, they're just evil. They're crazy." It's like, well, so would you if this was your whole life. Like, Anyway, that ending came together for me. That was cool. How it's like, oh, her plan worked out.
Zoos are very problematic for me.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I have like a love-hate with them. I don't want them to exist and don't think they should, but I love that I can go and see a rhinoceros.
That's exactly it. It's super, it's like very problematic for like, you go with your kids or, like my nieces and nephews and stuff like that, and they're like blown away. And I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. But also what they're blown away about, it's really messed up.
Right. I know. It's like the animal's not feeling the same way.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I just wanted to bring up lastly what I had in what I said in the summary of why I liked it, was just to emphasize again how well this worked because of the minimal cast and locations. And again, I said like The Fly is a modern example that sort of, took inspiration from films like this. And
definitely.
The Wolfman and the Black Cat. But it was just sort of always a good reminder of like, you can make something more potent, kind of like Onibaba, actually, I should mention too, with that minimal cast and locations and just pushing the theme or the exploration, I should say, of a theme. Because that's how I define it. It's not like they're making a point. They're posing interesting questions, which is why I kind of love this film, is because it leaves you, that's a mark of a good film for me.
So my last thing is just a personal thing. I have a huge, huge crush on Jane Randolph.
Jane Randolph, who played Alice Moore. I looked up, she wasn't in much else.
Dude. My pitter-patter of my heart.
Right.
Should we move into some things that didn't work? You got anything
I feel
else
like I have one more thing, but I could count it as a thing of note if you want to move on.
Sure. Yeah, let's move on.
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
So, I'm not. I guess I don't know. In talking, I'm glad we talked about this because like I said, I don't know. I didn't love the movie, but there's so much good shit in the movie that I'm like weirded out by why I didn't love it. So I think it kind of reduces down to one or two just broad things. In that, it was hard for me to care, I guess, about this relationship. And I'm not sure why. I think maybe it's a product of Oliver just being kind of like he feels very whatever to me.
That was the point, though, I saw.
I agree. But
doesn't...
I'm not compelled by the sort of the what's going on. And it felt like there was about a 20-minute period of the movie where I just was like, yeah, so we're still here? We're still just in this place?
Yeah.
Of she is struggling with her internal, demons, and he's just patiently waiting. And I just was like,
yeah.
And that, I think, soured my like getting on board thing, even despite of the cool shit that ends up happening, because like I enjoyed watching the movie, and there are great moments, but as a whole, I was like, yeah, I don't think I'll watch this again. Except to see Jane Randolph, you know what I'm saying, in that swimsuit. Woo, baby!
That swimsuit, right? That beige 1940s swimsuit is kind of awesome, actually.
I love it, yeah.
I could respond to that, but it would just be more like what did work for me. I could make that point I didn't get to make in the last section. I could do now in response to that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or should I save it? Okay.
No, I think it's fine. It's just,
So you're saying, the dude that I agree, just did not have it, and that was your sort of in for it. But like, I thought from the get-go that this guy, especially because he was just the sort of, when you have a love triangle and he's the single-sexed one of the, the odd man out one, so to speak, odd man out, of the love triangle. And just his immediate character, like as soon as he started talking to her, I'm like, okay, this guy isn't the interesting one at all. He's simply emblematic of a certain way of thought that we've already talked about.
Yes.
So it was never... So as I only liked, it wasn't a matter of feeling like I needed to be drawn in by him at all, because he became just a sort of interesting, representation of something to observe in this context. But what drew me in so hard, again, sorry for breaking our rules a little here. This is more what did work, and we are in what did not work for us. But to respond to Tim's point, what I was just drawn in so much by our actual lead, Irina, because she, like, I sympathized with her and identified with her, which is, I guess, empathized.
Yep.
Which is, she was so interesting because she's like an outsider who didn't have any friends. She's on the short end of a love triangle. And short end of a stick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, no one believes her, which is the one for me that like is so just gets in my gut and chest, kind of when it's like I wanted her just to like transform into the cat just to show them a point, and she did, I was so into it because of her character. And then even to a lesser extent, Irina, or sorry, no, she's Irina, Alice, the two female leads were the ones who kind of had the heads on their shoulders that I could relate with. So
this is a little part of what made me just not love it too, is when you're representing the other, but you're taking the status quo character of Alice and giving her the attributes of like the strong-willed, strong sort of like vocal, takes action attributes. I'm annoyed by that, because I'm like, fuck, like I'm not annoyed by it. I think that's great that she has those attributes because that those are like compelling. But Irina should have them as well. Like they don't have to be like one has them and one doesn't. She does
in her own way though, because she doesn't go to the psychologist and lies to them.
You're right, but it is a extremely passive form of having those things where it's an avoidant form of it.
Well, that I wouldn't have bought it if it was the other way because it's like the werewolf thing. Like you can't be in werewolf mode when you're not a werewolf, to sort of, I think, make it more compelling.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. There's some trickiness within this for me. I'm not sure how you would do it differently and make it satisfying for me, but there's some tropiness of the American woman winning out and the foreign woman being kind of the bad guy, and I was like,
yeah, I guess again because I didn't view her. It was muddled in a good way where I never viewed her as she's bad because she's the foreigner. No, she was the hero for me, even though she murdered something at the end. She knew she killed herself for murdering someone.
Yeah, and that's why I think you're right. It is gray, but I was trying to sort of say what at the time is the audience going to kind of take away from this, and in a time where World War II has started or is about to. I mean, just when did this?
It's on.
42 is already started, right? Yeah. So, when they're making it. They're in the midst of that all starting up, and you start thinking about the nationalism around war, and then this movie where I'm trying to figure out which side the audience is going to kind of land on.
Yeah,
even if the filmmaker's intention was to kind of comment on that kind of stuff, I was ultimately, I can see the sort of the nationalistic movement and whatever you would call that fervor causing people to misread the bigger point of this movie in a negative way.
I think in the long run though that's not a bad thing. We have to have good art as sort of the torchbearers of this sort of righteousness. So it's I do think the filmmakers intended, what you said, the filmmakers intended that it's exact opposite, where it's saying, right. No, look at our own flaws, make us sympathize with the foreigner more. But it's when 2001: A Space Odyssey come out, you read the terrible reviews, but then you read those handwritten letters to Stanley Kubrick of people just how important it was to them. So I think it's more important sort of with art to make something that's maybe will reach fewer people, but is going to last longer and is going to be more powerful for those people and have a more truth to it for those people versus feeling when you have to sort of quote unquote dumb something down or make it sort of it has a clear, moral point to it at the end. Those are the movies that people more maybe forget, or can't motivate the same way. So it's that trade-off of you're motivating less people more, I think. And that we're still talking about this movie today.
Well, and I may need to call myself out a little bit in this because I am a American white male, right? So I'm trying to get, inside of these concepts, but ultimately it's not my experience. Right? I grew up in suburbia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's I never went to war. I never have had these experiences. So there's a bit of a disconnect that I'm trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And maybe in my attempting to do that, I'm just not.
It's it's for me. I'm so thankful for films because I can get so nostalgic for living in suburbia. I can and I love it. All that what Stranger Things glorifies. All those films. It's great. But there's the two sides to everything. Where I feel even as a kid, there was something weird about suburbia too. You know, like
Definitely.
I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, but then I go and see movies like The Burbs, which
Yeah.
was satire on suburbia, and I
The
loved that
Babysitter.
film, right? Yeah, and it's sort of, you know, like what I was saying, cat people, I think, did for, you know, people who might have responded to it at the time, and certainly nowadays too. It sort of allows a truth again to sort of rise to the top.
Yeah, and I
Which good
guess
art does.
Yeah, I guess you can sort of look at it from a different. I'm being kind of critical of the way they constructed things, but if the commentary is a sympathetic one, then having the all-American guy end up with the all-American girl who's, you know, been waiting for him and leaving the foreigner is more of a tragedy.
Yeah. Well, I still think the foreigner comes as the more respected person. She made this ultimate sacrifice, but what she did was kind of to this American couple that would have been none the wiser otherwise. Like, did she give their life a sort of jolt that it needed? Like, not
That's
only did
interesting.
she get them together to sort of wake them up, but this guy who's like, you know, I've never been unhappy until now.
That's right, that shit. Oh fuck.
Right?
You are very effectively bringing me around on this movie.
I just, again, I have stuff to think about when a movie gives me stuff to hang on to like this to sort of pick apart. I love it so much.
To be honest, beyond those two kind of ideas, I really don't have anything.
The only thing I put for what did not work, and I feel like this could have been a stretch because I felt like I'd have something. But, you know, since I was such a fan of, I said, the minimal locations characters thing, there was the pet shop scene, which was like, even though I loved the animals getting afraid of her and like looking terrified, and I loved the pet shop owner's line of just like hitting it home for the 1940s audiences, like, oh, cats just know if someone's off or not.
I know.
Like, I like
So
that,
heavy-handed.
but just sort of, it was the sort of only not sort of kind of like standalone, just kind of odd man out sort of scene for like because every single other scene you have like the park, the apartment, their work, and that little restaurant, and that's kind of in the psychiatrist's office with the psychiatrist. So
you know what I think is not working and why we may feel this way, and I think it could have been solved. I think that scene is too bright.
it was the rest of the movie was so like rainy and gray,
a backlot set, and it's lit too well. And if they had creeped up that pet shop a little bit.
It was raining outside though, I guess.
Yeah, but inside it was
like
just there was it didn't it's like they picked a fucking set that already was there for something else and they're just like, great, let's just run in and do this scene real quick.
Right.
As opposed to everything else where it's like you can tell, like we were talking about before, they really put some design into every other, you know, scene and set.
Right.
That one was the one, although I like that it was jam-packed.
Yeah.
It was a little claustrophobic, and there's so many animals in cages in it.
That was it. I liked it as if I could see it as a standalone scene. But I think in the context, this could be more, you know, our modern audience, how we view films. We don't need as much exposition. But like you could have just had him buy a pet canary, which I guess wouldn't have made much sense because he likes cats. But just sort of to make a point, like it was sort of just accomplishing exposition and getting her the canary, but like, and then making it known that animals are afraid of her, which the canary dies. Like we get that already. There are other cats at other locations that like run away from her. Like we didn't need the scene.
Well, there's all.
This is just again me
interesting.
nitpicking.
Yeah. I think you could make that scene better.
Yeah, or just not exist, or I don't know.
I like it. It's eerie as fuck.
Yeah. Well, again,
but I think that could have been much eerier.
Right. Well, what I was saying again, what stood out was just the fact that they went there at all.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain semi-claustrophobia that comes from when you have 4 or 5 locations and that's it. And you keep going back to them and think like Oni Baba and The Fly again.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
But not a deal breaker for me.
I forgot to mention the 2 best moments of the movie for me, really. I mean, you mentioned the pool, but the chase, I'm going back to the thing that worked. The chase through Central Park, like I know that road that they're matching And it is a very creepy. It's a through road. I forget what the actual street is, but it's a through road through the middle of Central Park.
Right.
And it is dark and damp and creepy.
Oh, cool.
And you never would walk there at night.
Yeah,
like, you just wouldn't.
The sort of you go under the tunnels. And,
like under the
well,
park
that's
in a
what
way.
I said, when there's scenes in this that sort of end up being key tenets in horror. It's like, okay, yeah, the woman getting stalked by an unknown pursuant that's possibly supernatural. Yeah. No, this was the one that did it. It felt like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is when you want that scene just delivering. Like, this is it. I don't know. I think it was so cool for that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that scene.
But that brings me to my final sort of broader point, and I think part of my disappointment in the movie, where it came from,
what did not work,
was, essentially, I was really waiting until that moment for something that was even remotely horror or scary in a way that I was excited about. Because I think the movie does a lot of good stuff in subtle ways of like creepiness and sort of suspense and eeriness and whatever. But up until that chase, I was like, I don't know. This is really a horror film for me.
When we were watching that, I remember you were like, oh, she's going to be a cat. And then I kept, at that point, I'm kind of like, yeah, I guess so. That's probably what's going to do. And now because you said it, it was just going to be lame of like, oh, and then the cat walks out from under the tunnel, you know?
Right.
So then when it didn't do that, and it was completely reliant on like, there's just the trees are shuffling over the fence, I just thought that was so cool, and I'm glad they went that direction.
That's smart. It's really smart.
And
don't show your monsters.
Yeah, so that was my point to you saying why that worked for me, but it sounds like it's still, even then you agree with that rule. It didn't work for you in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. That whole scene works. What didn't work, I guess, is the lead up to that moment. Me just feeling like, when is this gonna get scary?
I mean, that was it. I thought that was scary.
That I'm saying up until right before that moment started.
Got it.
I was like, come on.
Sorry.
And then it started, and I went, fuck yeah.
I completely misunderstood what you were saying. I loved how the scene ended. What does he say? Where the guys are like, you look like you've just seen a ghost. And she's...
Did you see it too?
Yeah. How so brilliant. Good. Like, that I haven't heard that since. God, that's such a brilliant... Like she's too terrified to sort of like come up with a non-response. She's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I loved that.
So good.
Things of that. So that was all that worked for me, or did not work for me, was that one scene I had down. So things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
There's a lot, actually, of just really cool shit. So I feel like we can't get through all of it. There's so much.
Well, let's just try to get through it.
So read Roger Ebert's review, because there's a bunch of revealing stuff in there. But
awesome. I'm surprised I didn't.
Just the things for me, really, we kind of have touched on, just the time that this was made and what was going on in the world. That's a huge thing. And when you put it in that context, it really does feel like it opens up a lot of interesting, conversation and just like contemplation about like why they made certain choices and what they were speaking to.
Well, that's what exactly, like, I thought it was so interesting and a thing of note, like what we said earlier, how that, or like how you said, the naivety on display with the characters were, for me, I saw that in that attitude, like we already said, their attitude to her not being, her having issues is dated now, and I think it's a positive thing to look how we've changed. Where back then he said, and it was totally commonplace, oh, we just gotta fix the thing in your head that's wrong with you, and then all the problems will go away.
Yep.
When now you'll hear, I've gotten a lot of help from seeing this, psychiatrist. I can recommend you. It's still hard, but it's like, oh, it's real all of a sudden that we've come
treatment can work.
Yeah. Well, just as far as how we look at it, where the definition of what working means or not is like a positive change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think back then just reinforced whatever...
It's not a clock.
Whatever was damaging with the person by saying, oh, you are wrong, we have to fix you.
Right.
What better way to reinforce those negative self-destructive ways or tendencies.
Yeah. So a couple cool little things, like, for example, the budget was, pretty good for that time. It was $134,000. But this motherfucker made $8 million in the box office.
Well, it was interesting.
It crushed Citizen Kane, which came out the same year.
There was it was The Magnificent Andersons, another Orson Welles movies, I think, where they borrowed the staircase from that for this film, like the grand staircase in the apartment building. So they were actually working on a budget a bit and sort of building things around.
Yeah.
Around these pre-existing
I mean,
films. That's a sleeper hit, right?
Holy shit.
That's a bunch of money back then.
Yeah, and it kind of what do you call it? It re-upped or revamped, or no, what am I trying to say? It got Val Lewton's career back on board.
Yeah. So yeah, we should, I wanted to read up a lot more of these guys, and there's a whole, I think it's like the History of Hollywood podcast on Val Lewton, but yeah, what is his name? The director, Jacques
Tourneur.
Jacques Tourneur. Like him and Val, they had a relationship, a very productive relationship that I think lasted 4 films under RKO. But I watched a little snippet from the interview that's on the Blu-ray. They only had a snippet online. I couldn't watch the whole thing. But it was interesting. Yeah, Jacques was describing himself. Well, he was describing Val as like he's an idealist with his head in the clouds and like is very imaginative. And then Jacques described himself, that was him talking about the producer Val. This is the director talking now, Jacques. He said, "I'm though totally pragmatic. I'm a realist," which is actually funny saying out loud now because you see that dichotomy in the film itself.
Yeah, definitely.
But he said that them working together gave the films a, quote, like, sense of poetry that he lacked. So these films had a sense of poetry. But, like, I just looked at that more as, like, it's great when you have a producer coming with these sort of, like, head in the clouds, ideas, and then a pragmatic director to bring them down.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's really neat.
I think it's cool that the next movie, I think it's the next movie they made, I'm almost certain, is I Walked with a Zombie, one of these early, along with White Zombie, like early zombie movies that were more about that like voodoo reanimation thing. Yeah. Coming off the tail end of
Dead and Buried.
Dead and Buried, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have their submission to that.
But Jacques did some cool shit, man. I mean, he made a bunch of stuff.
Well,
a lot of horror.
Did you read about what Val was doing early on?
No. Where's that?
This was kind of funny. Wait, this must have been. I assume this was
Val's a Russian American. That's cool.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure this was in Jeffrey O'Brien's essay. That's in the Criterion thing. Mm-hmm. He said, "This better be that I didn't totally get this down." He was talking about Val Lewton and not Jacques. But pretty sure he said about Val, anyone poking into his earlier years would discover that he was also a poet of decadent tendencies, meaning a pornographer and the author of a series of pulpy novels.
Nice.
So, very risque, called like No Bed of Her Own, Where the Cobra Sings, A Laughing Woman.
Oh my God, I want to read all
right?
these.
Published under a range of, and he published them under different pseudonyms. So what Val said that I thought was funny and why this is a fun, noteworthy thing I thought was that when RKO tapped him to produce movies for the horror market, he joked that somebody had said he wrote horrible novels and the studio misinterpreted that as horror novels. So
amazing.
Oh yeah, you said he did a horror. No, they said horrible. Oh, whatever.
Man. Just fucking succeeding upward, just fall right up those stairs.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I don't have really anything else.
To the super quick ones I like to end on, there was a sequel 2 years later called Curse of the Cat People. It's pretty, apparently doesn't have a lot to do with the original. It does have some of the actors, like the two surviving leads and stuff. But they said as far as type of horror, I guess it's not like a werecat person. I think it's like her ghost coming back. Okay. But my favorite director is Joe Dante, just did The Burbs, which we mentioned. He said that the film's, this is sequel, Curse of the Cat People, Joe Dante said, had a disturbingly Disney-esque fairy tale qualities that have perplexed horror fans for decades. And the film's been utilized in college psychology courses. So there.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then last but not least, there was a 1982 remake.
Yeah, that was the one thing
directed
I
by
thought.
Paul Schrader. I don't recommend the female actors Natasha Kinski, who I'm sure was Irina.
Yeah.
And then Annette O'Toole. I kind of recognize that name. But I do recognize the two male actors in it, of course, Malcolm McDowell and John Hurd.
Yep.
So there you go. I don't know if I want to see it, but
I kind of want to see it just to see what the hell they tried to do.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll be talking about it for episode 132 of our show, for all we know, Tim. Great. All right. That's Cat People from 1942. Woo!
Yeah, that was cool. Maybe I should change my not my recommendation, my, what was the thing? My rating.
You rated it?
No, I'm still a stream.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm a stronger stream now.
All right. Well, how about anything you could recommend renting to people? Meaning, do you have a recommendation? Because we are recommending now.
Oh, no. I can't remember what I watched the other day. It was good, too. Fuck.
I started keeping a Letterboxd account, for what I've watched. I had one forever ago, but I started one again. It's just like something to track. You log your movie when you watch it. It's a website.
Oh, fuck, dude. I wish I had a comprehensive list of everything I've ever watched.
Start it now.
Oh, my God. So many movies.
Letterboxd.com.
It was on Shudder. What the fuck was it? Damn it.
Well, maybe you'll remember. I'll say mine.
You say yours. I'll think.
Mine, I went in theaters to go see one that I was kind of hoping we'd watch and talk about, but you did not seem interested, which was the new Gaspar Noé horror film Climax.
It's not that I'm not interested. It's just not something I feel like I want to see in the theater. That's all it is. My
recommendation is see this if you can see it in theaters, because it was such a cool theater experience. It has this like awesome choreographed dance scene that starts it out, and then it's kind of like what I've said in my other recommendations. Movies that I respond to are ones where it's like the pacing and the structure of it. It's just entirely doesn't. It's not fallen into any kind of common ways of doing things. It's so just doing its own thing, and when that is doing that successfully, I get so drawn in. So like the sort of rising tension that this film is it worked wholly for me, and was so, oh my God. And the music that's playing is like this house dance music, like seeing in theaters. So it's like intense and awesome.
Right. Okay. I could be convinced.
Visually, like what it was doing, like cameras going upside down and stuff, like for extended sequences. Oh my God. Great. I recommended Climax. I don't know if it will still be in theaters, but if you live in a big city, I'm sure there'll be repertory screenings in life. So go see it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go see it.
Yeah, so go see it, Tim.
I remember why I couldn't remember what my recommendation was, is because I turned on the thing that you had recommended, the Eli Roth. Masters or whatever it is. And it's really good. I watched, I think, 2 or 3. I think I watched 3 episodes.
History of horror.
Yeah. And there's so many good things in there. Man, fuck. People need to go back to, this is not my recommendation, but like go back to Day of the Dead. It's so fucking good.
I have watched it since high school. I only watched it the once when we were going
both.
through the Romero movies.
The original Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead are just fucking awesome.
Are those your recommendations?
No. So I opened Shudder to try and remember, and came across a movie that is definitely a recommendation for me. I just remembered. I'd like forgotten I had seen this, and it's fucking awesome and trippy as fuck. But it's called Escape from Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, the one shot in Disneyland in Disney World.
Dude, it is good.
I've never seen it.
It's so weird and fucking amazing what the group of people, I don't even know who the filmmakers were, but what they were able to pull off is fucking awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that was my reason for wanting to see it. I didn't think it actually had any merit aside from that, but maybe, hey, you recommended it.
It does. It's got some cool, weird ass shit in it. So yeah, that's mine. Escape from Tomorrow.
And hey, it's on Shudder. I'll check it out.
Hell yeah. I'd actually kind of want to watch it again.
Cool. That's a solid recommendation.
That's right.
All right. Well, so what are we doing next week? Should we pull the hat?
Oh, what? What's that noise?
Oh, that is our skull bike bell, Tim.
Why did that? It stopped me from pulling from the hat.
You know why? Because next week's episode will not be a hat pull film.
What?
The skull means, Tim, that bell ring means we are going to see a new release film.
Hey now.
New release film. And what is it, folks? Well, it is the month of March, the year 2019, and it means that Us is coming out, or has come out.
So excited. It comes out in real time.
It will have come out when this episode's released in a week.
Yeah,
it comes out this Friday for us recording it. And it's looking hopeful. I don't want to say much about it. We're going to have our first guest to talk about Us with us, which I'm excited about,
Awesome.
in addition to seeing the film.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited. I've avoided like everything around this movie. I don't want to know anything.
I know that there was a trailer on the other day, and I closed my eyes for it. I think it was when I was seeing Climax. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Great. Well, where you can find us, as in Tim and I, and Dismembering Horror, not the film that we just talked about. You can find us, if you haven't already, at dismemberinghorror.com.
Yeah.
There are links to our Instagram, our Twitter,
all
our
of those.
email. You could email us your suggestions.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
We would love your suggestions.
Yeah, you
for
should
what
do
to
that.
watch. Yeah.
Yeah, and just have a chat with us.
Mm-hmm.
We're around.
Yeah. And we never say this too, Tim, because I think it is because we're annoyed by it, but I think every so often we should say, if you happen to be listening, could use your help, write us a review if it's 5 stars.
It makes a huge, huge difference. Just to get
We'll take
more
a 4
people
star
out
one,
there,
but
just so people know we exist. Like, it pushes us out there more when you get a review. And if you like what you hear and you think other people should hear it, that'll help us.
If you're listening and you want to take the minute, well, it would mean a lot to us. So thank you. But you listening at all means you're hearing this right now, and that actually means more. So thank you very much for even hearing that request in the first place.
Seriously.
Great. Right. That's it.
Cool.
See you guys next time.
Yeah. Adios.